So it's everybody's favorite time of the day. We have some brand new poll numbers, guys. I am recording this video in the middle of the Liberal Party leadership debate right now. It just started 5 minutes ago. I was watching a bit of it, but I knew I had to chime in because this new development, which we have with these new numbers, is pretty big. It's pretty big, and we need to talk about it because it is the first time ever since Pierre Poilievre was elected leader of the Conservative Party that the Liberals have started to lead in the polls. First, I want to talk about this. So right now we have some new numbers, and if you take a look, 338 Canada does a good job of doing sort of like the aggregate. It's still a 10-point gap. I want to note that, but at the same token, we had brand new polls come out from Ipsos today. This is Ipsos, by the way, for those that don't know. They are an A+ polling firm, so they're very accurate. And for the first time, I don't know in how long, I think in probably 4 or 5 years, the Liberals have actually started to take the lead over the Conservatives. Now, keep in mind a few things. This is not even assuming that Mark Carney is going to be the leader. So this is a pretty big deal. I mean, 38 to 36, that is a huge deal, man. That is a huge deal. This is for a party that was down at about 13, 14% at some point. So it's not looking good for Pierre Poilievre. Now, I do want to note, he has released a new ad. And I do want to talk about this ad because I think there's some things that we need to uncover. But first, I want to show you guys the ad. And then you guys let me know what you guys think in the comment section. But I'll let you know what I think after I watch the video. And let's react to it really quickly.
And something that my government is going to do is to use all of the powers of the federal government, including the emergency powers of the federal government, to accelerate the major projects that we need in order to build this economy and take on the Americans.
Si une province dit non, vous ne passez pas de tuyau.
Oui, absolument.
Vous n'imposez
jamais
pas.
au Québec.
C'est possible que nous aurions une oléoduc d'Alberta au Québec, peut-être aux Maritimes, afin de déplacer les importations de pétrole des États-Unis.
Est-ce que vous êtes en train de dire que le Québec, est-ce que le Québec en ce moment, parce que là, il y a Trump qui menace, le Québec qui dit non dans le temps, et Trump ne sait pas, le Québec pourrait maintenant dire oui, selon votre pensée?
Il y a des possibilités. Tout a changé. C'est une possibilité.
Okay.
Et, point final, le gouvernement fédéral va agir rapidement et rigoureusement.
Okay. So, I think we're going to, first I want to talk about this caption real quick, and then I'll talk about the video. So why is Carney playing tricks on Canadians? He says one thing in English, tries to sneak in the opposite thing in French, and then says a completely different thing in French again. Exclamation mark. What will he say tonight? So this is posted today because the leadership debate is happening as we speak. So if you are watching this video, this will probably come out around the time that the debate is ending. Please make sure to tune in for the last few minutes. But nonetheless, I do want to talk about this really quickly. So what he's basically saying is that he's flip-flopping on the topic of oil pipelines in Quebec, because Quebec is pretty well known to oppose these kinds of things. And so he's basically trying to get like a gotcha moment on, his contradictions. I think, look, if you're going to attack your opponent, that's a fair point. I mean, oil pipelines are definitely a fair point to attack on. But I don't think that overall this was a really effective ad. And I'll explain why. There weren't really any new points that he brought up. I mean, you could talk about contradictions. That's not a problem. Every politician contradicts themselves. Okay, so yes, he did contradict himself. I don't really know what his thinking was, Carney's thinking I'm referring to. But at the same token, will people watch this and be like, yeah, I'm not going to vote for him? I don't know. That's the big thing. When you're releasing an ad, as the opponent, you want to release that ad so that your opponent's supporters say, oh yeah, I don't know if I'm going to vote for this person. Oh yeah, maybe I should vote for the other person. That's sort of what you want to do. And I don't really know if this ad is one of those things where it's like, yeah, some people are going to be like, yeah, I'm really not going to vote for Mark Carney because he said one thing about implementing emergency powers to try to get Quebec to do one thing, and then he said, oh no, it's not going to be possible, blah, blah, blah. Like, I just don't think it's that effective. So, while this ad is, a minute long or whatever, I just don't think it's effective. And keep in mind, by the way, Pierre Poilievre, this was released about 3 hours ago, Pierre Poilievre, on his ads, he gets a lot of views. This only has 44,000. And I know it's only been 3 hours, but I've seen some of his ads released in 1 hour, and you'll have like 500,000 views. So I don't know if it's a question of the algorithm not putting it up. I don't know if it's a question of it just not being effective enough. Or maybe it's just the same old thing. Now, I do like the fact that he did switch away from the carbon tax. I'm talking about Pierre Poilievre. And I do think that was really effective to try to switch away from that. However, like I said before, if you want to hammer home the Canadian votes, if you really want to gain votes from people that are considering voting Liberal, talk about the tariffs. Talk about the tariffs. Pipelines and stuff, we already know where Pierre lies on that. We already know where he lies on that. Carney, you can talk about that and debate against him. You don't really need to talk about it in ads. I don't think it's really effective. In ads, you should be really focusing on the tariffs. You should be focusing on your plan. That's what I think Pierre should be doing. Now, in fairness, Carney has not, or I should say the Liberals, have not really released any crazy ads against the Conservatives. So the Conservatives are sort of getting an edge. And I do think that that's very important when you're in a political campaign. In fairness, though, at the same token, to the Liberals, they still haven't elected a leader. And by the way, just for anybody who's concerned about whether election will happen later on, it probably won't. Carney will probably call it right away. So, if I'm the Conservatives, you know what I'm doing? I'm saying no. It's time that we go and talk about our plan, because Trump is going to impose those tariffs. He is going to do it. But first, before we talk about that a bit more, I want to talk about this. So this is a new Ledger poll. So I showed you guys Ipsos, and Ipsos was at, what was it? It's at 38 to 36. So that's a 2-point gap. Okay, so 38 to 36. Still a big enough gap. I mean, it's 2 points, but that's higher than the Liberals were ever at, ever since Pierre Poilievre was elected leader. Take a look at this. Now it's 40 to 38. I want to note, though, that the NDP is 11%. And if you do translate that to a map, that'll only translate to 3 seats for the NDP. The NDP is basically wiped out. So if there's any person that wants to keep stalling as long as possible, it's Jagmeet Singh and the NDP. They don't want an election anytime soon. But the Liberals, they would win a majority. And they would win a majority by just over 4 seats. 176 seats. Now, I do think it's worth noting that is less than what Trudeau got in 2015. Obviously, he did less in 2019 and 2021. So this would be an improvement, but nonetheless, they still do end up winning, which sort of is the goal of any political party. Now, in fairness, this is one poll, but it's not the only poll that we've seen this week that has shown this number, because if we take a look right here, Polling Canada showed this. I'm sorry, this is the Ipsos one already. This is the one I want to show you guys. ECOS. I know a lot of people have had some issues with ECOS, but I do think it's worth noting that ECOS is still a reliable pollster to some extent, if you do consider the fact that they actually have a lower margin for the Liberals than Ipsos, and Ipsos is very well known to not be biased at all. I think it's worth noting that this is kind of a big trend. I mean, when you have ECOS, who is saying 1.4 lead for the Liberals, when you have Ipsos saying 2-point lead, and then when you have, Ledger, obviously this is if Mark Carney were Liberal leader, but still, Ledger is saying 40 to 38. I mean, that's 3 polls in the span of about, it's been 2 days since these polls have come out. That's 3 polls in the span of 2 days that have shown a Liberal lead in each one of them. Now, I know there's a lot of people who are going to be angry about this, and I think that's fair. If you are a Conservative voter, or Conservative supporter for that matter, you have the right to be angry, because you did have a 25-point gap, or a 25-point lead. And so it is valid to point out to certain flaws. But I also think it's worth noting that this is sort of because Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives did not effectively convey their message. Because the fact of the matter is, when you have a 25-point lead, okay, and when you have a 25-point lead in January, and the earliest you can get your election is about May or March or whatever, and you lose that lead, and now you are actually trailing behind your opponent, and your opponent hasn't even selected their leader officially yet. When that happens, I think that's an issue. And that's not an issue with the voters, okay? Because the Conservative voters are not the issue. The Conservative base has always been very strong. The issue is the effectiveness and in conveying your message. So Pierre Poilievre has not been effective in conveying his message. And the fact of the matter is, if there's anybody you want to blame, look, you could blame Mark Carney, you could blame Justin Trudeau. I would blame 2 people. Donald Trump, number 1, because Trump sort of caused this whole national unity thing with, the tariffs and whatnot, and that sort of led the shift to Liberal support for many of the people that were going to vote Conservative. But the second person I blame is Pierre Poilievre. Pierre Poilievre should have understood the assignment. It's very simple. When you have a 25-point lead, you just can't screw up. You can't go in cruise control, or, that's number 1, or you can't just start saying stupid things. Because the fact of the matter is, he started focusing on things that weren't serious issues. When Mark Carney announced that the carbon tax was going to be scrapped, Pierre Poilievre should have immediately stopped talking about it. Immediately. But what happened? Well, for the next 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, he just kept talking about the carbon tax. And you know what happens? People get irritated. People start to tune you out. So when you have a new person, when you have new ideas, people are going to obviously be inclined to look towards that. So that's what really happened here. Now, I am going to point this out. It is far from over. Okay? The campaign hasn't even started. The Liberals haven't even chosen the leader yet. Okay? There's not even a new prime minister yet. So it is very much far from over. There's a few things that Conservatives can do. Number one, change your messaging. So change your messaging, change your tone. What does that mean? Well, quite frankly, you need to stop focusing on the carbon tax. That's number one. And I know he has been focusing a lot on the carbon tax. Number two, you need to stop with these corny ads. Okay, they're very corny ads, like carbon tax Carney and, you know, with Carney with the little wink / devil eye. Like, that's really corny. It does not work with the average Canadian voter. I can't make that clear enough. Third thing, brother, you need to start talking about your policies. Pierre, people want to hear your specific policies. And I know there's going to be people in the comment section saying, oh, he already has done this, blah, blah, blah. No, he hasn't. He hasn't done it adequately enough. Okay? Because Pierre Poilievre, his thing is, he's very vague. He's very vague. I want specifics. Look, nobody is saying you don't want to cut government. I'm all for it. Cut government, no problem. I mean, I'm not saying go and cut our healthcare system, but I'm saying, you know, listen, if there's 10,000 bureaucrats that are not really contributing to our system, we're working 2 days a week, you can reevaluate their position. That's not an issue. But he does not talk about who he's going to cut. He doesn't talk about the timeline. He doesn't talk about when he's going to cut the deficit. He doesn't talk about when he's going to balance the budget. He doesn't talk about the timeframes. So I want to hear numbers. I want to hear specifics. You know, talking about building a base in Iqaluit, that's fine. I don't have an issue with that. But why are you going to do it, number one? Which he didn't really effectively convey. He said, you know, threats from Russia, which frankly is not really the case right now, at least. But nonetheless, I do think that's fine to do a base. But when are you going to do it? Like, how many years is it going to take? Is it going to be right away? How much support are you going to have in the House, considering the fact that he's now sort of veering into minority / losing the election territory? And what sort of funding are you going to get to try to fund this? I mean, I know there's been some talk about some other things that you want to, like balance the budget. He doesn't talk about timelines. So this is what we want to hear. This is what the voters want to hear. The voters want to hear about what you're going to do specifically. They want to hear about what you're going to do specifically. And stop focusing on the carbon tax, for the love of God. Now, for Mark Carney. Mark Carney, what happened yesterday with the comments he made with Hamas, that can't happen. I mean, you can't have slip-ups like that in the second official language of Canada. So what I'm saying is, for Mark Carney, he really needs to start focusing on his French. Mark Carney's French is much worse than Pierre Poilievre's French, and it's not a question. Out of all the main candidates that are going to be in this election, it's going to be Pierre Poilievre, Mark Carney, and Jagmeet Singh. Pierre Poilievre by far has the best French. So if Pierre Poilievre is able to effectively convey his points in French, he's going to be able to potentially break in with some Quebec voters. Now, I don't know if it's going to really happen because typically Conservatives don't do that well in Quebec. At the same token, if he does have someone like Mark Carney, who's his opponent, who doesn't really speak great French, and who's prone to those gaffes and mistakes, that could be an issue for Mark Carney. So Mark Carney, focus on your French, number one. Number two, I mean, I don't know how else to put this. He needs more personality. I mean, you know, Pierre Poilievre, whether you like him or not, he has personality. I mean, you know, he's a character. You know, the Apple video, he had the Breakfast with Justin video. I mean, he's good at entertaining people. And so that is sort of an important factor, especially this day and age with politicians. So Mark Carney needs to sort of be less monotone and, you know, very business-like. And I don't have an issue with being business-like. I just think, you know, have a bit more enthusiasm. Be a bit more charismatic. Pierre Poilievre definitely has that, by the way, for those that are wondering. He is very good at conveying his message when he is on the ball. Like, when it's a very strong message that is resonating with people, he knows how to convey it. Because he has the charisma. He has the charisma. He just needs to focus on messaging it properly. Okay, it's just focusing on what message you're going to deliver. That's the most important thing for Pierre Poilievre. Now, I do want to talk about Ontario really quickly because I could probably go on and on and on for that all day relating to Pierre Poilievre and Mark Carney, but I just want to talk about Ontario really quickly. And by the way, for those that are going to get mad and who hear my first lines, please just watch the rest of the video because I do give constructive feedback to the candidates. And I'm not here to bash any political party. I'm just here to provide critical feedback so that these parties can do better. Ultimately, I want a system that is as representative as possible. So all of you guys need to vote in the next election. That would be great. And that includes the Ontario election if you are from Ontario. So take a look at this. We have Doug Ford at 45% still, the Liberals still at 27%, and then the NDP at 19%. So it still is sort of the same seat formation, but Doug Ford has gone down. He's gone down 88, and I do think, again, that's sort of been the case the whole time. He's been fluctuating up and down. The lowest he ever hit was 85, I believe, but he's still going to be in that, he's going to be that 85 to about, 92, 93 range. He might even hit 100. I don't know. Maybe he will. But I think that's sort of, I don't know, that ship sort of sailed, I think, at this point, because he hasn't been at 100 in a while. But nonetheless, it's really a battle for official opposition at this point. So if you take a look right here, the Liberals, last time we checked, they were actually at 12. So they actually did go up, and they took 3 seats from the PCs, or at least they're projected to take 3 seats from the PCs. The biggest thing is going to be, is Brani Karambi going to be able to win her seat? That's probably one of the biggest things, actually, surprisingly. When you have a leader who's vying for the job of official opposition, they can't win their leader. If they can't win their own seat, that's going to be an issue. That's going to be an issue. But then again, I mean, for Doug Ford, it is very likely, well, I wouldn't even say very likely. I think it's almost guaranteed that he will win the election. If he does not, I'll be very surprised. I mean, the election's happening in 2 days. It's happening on Thursday. So if you are in Ontario, obviously if you have the ability to vote, if you're not like underage, or if you're not a non-resident of Ontario, make sure to vote, because this is a huge election. This is a huge election. Whoever wins this election, well, I mean, it's probably going to be Doug Ford, but if Doug Ford wins, he's going to be there until 2026. That'll be about what will that be? Sorry, no, what am I saying? 2026, 2029. What am I saying? If he does win, he'll be there for 11 years in power by the end of 2029, which would be pretty crazy by the end of his term in 2029. So it's going to be a big election. I think, I'm going to cover it potentially the day after, because I am actually going to be doing some stuff on that election day, so I'll be pretty busy. But I do want to talk about one last thing. So I am going to be doing an interview with an MP near me. It is a Liberal MP. I know, shocker. It has nothing to do with me preferring any political party. It just happened to be the local MP in my region. And so this MP is a great guy. He's a good dude. He was willing to speak to us, and he's been around since 2019. So his name is Tony Van Benen, and he's been there for about 6 years. And we're going to be interviewing him. So stay tuned for that. That's going to be happening. That'll probably air sometime in mid-March or so, because I'm going to be conducting the interview on the 7th of March, I believe. So just stay tuned for that. That'll be an interesting interview, and I'm going to ask some tough questions. If there are any questions that you guys would like me to ask, let me know in the comment section, because this is a Liberal MP. This is someone who is in the government, and I do think that's worth noting that, the fact that he has experience within the current government, he definitely has some eyes and some thoughts on things that we don't really know, and maybe that he's better versed in. And just keep it civil. Just keep it civil. That's all I'm going to leave it at. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next one.